Hi everyone, and welcome back to Ambition to Achieve. So, over the past few months, I've had the privilege of sitting down with 8 incredible entrepreneurs from across North Wales. They've come from completely different industries. Some have built businesses from scratch and others have turned hobbies into careers. Some are just starting out while others have years of experience behind them. And every interview has been different and every entrepreneur has their own story. But after spending hours listening to these conversations, I realised something. Although their businesses are completely different, many of the lessons they shared were exactly the same. So today, I want to share the 8 biggest lessons I've taken away from interviewing these entrepreneurs. Now, I don't claim to have all the answers. I'm still building Ambition to Achieve myself, and in many ways, I'm on this journey alongside you. But one of the greatest privileges of hosting this channel is being able to learn from people who have already taken that leap. So whether you're thinking about starting a business, chasing a personal goal, or simply looking for a bit of inspiration, I genuinely hope 1 or 2 of these lessons will help you as much as they've helped me. So let's get started. Lesson number 1. One of the biggest things I noticed is that nobody waited until they were ready. The very first thing that stood out to me was that none of the entrepreneurs I interviewed waited until everything was perfect before they got started. And I think that's a lesson that applies to every single one of us. So often we tell ourselves, I'll start next month, or I'll do it when I've got more money or more time, or I'll wait until I know a little bit more. The truth is, there probably never comes a point where you feel completely ready, and there's never a time that's the right time. Every entrepreneur I spoke to had moments of uncertainty. They all had questions. They all had doubts. Some were taking a financial risk. Others were leaving secure jobs. Some were entering industries they'd never worked in before. But despite all of those unknowns, they did make a decision and they did take that first step. That doesn't mean they were fearless. That's quite the opposite. I think courage is often misunderstood. And people assume courage means not feeling nervous. But from the conversations I've had, I don't believe that's true at all. Courage is feeling nervous. It's feeling uncertain. It's knowing there are risks and choosing to move forward anyway. And one of the biggest things I love about interviewing entrepreneurs is hearing the beginning of their story. When you see a successful business today, it's easy to assume everything has always gone well. But when you actually sit down with the owner, you realise that every business does have a beginning. Every successful entrepreneur had a first customer. Every successful entrepreneur had a first day. And everyone had moments where they questioned whether they were doing the right thing. And that's incredibly reassuring because it reminds us that successful people aren't born different. They simply make the decision to begin. As I've been building Ambition to Achieve, that's probably one of the biggest lessons I've taken away. This channel isn't perfect. Every interview teaches me something, and every video teaches me something. Every edit teaches me something, and I'm still learning. But if I'd waited until I knew everything about filming, interviewing, editing and running a YouTube channel, Ambition to Achieve simply wouldn't exist. Sometimes progress comes from learning as you go. I think that's one of the greatest gifts that entrepreneurship gives you. You don't have to know everything before you start. You simply have to be willing to take that first step, keep learning and keep moving forward. So, if you're watching this today and you've been sitting on an idea for months, or maybe even years, ask yourself one simple question. What's the smallest first step you could take this week? Because every ambition begins with exactly that one step. Lesson number 2. Passion gives you the strength to keep going. Now, the second lesson that really stood out to me was how passionate every entrepreneur was about what they do. Now, that doesn't mean they love every single part of running a business. I'm sure none of them wake up excited to do paperwork, deal with accounts, answer difficult emails or solve unexpected problems. But when they talked about their business, their faces lit up. You could hear it in their voices. You could see it in their expressions. And I think that's incredibly important. Because passion is what keeps you going when things become difficult. And running a business isn't always glamorous. There are quiet periods, there are difficult customers, and there are unexpected bills. And there are moments when things don't go to plan. The entrepreneurs I interviewed weren't pretending those moments don't exist. In fact, many of them openly spoke about challenges that they faced. But what came across time and time again was that they genuinely believed in what they were building, and that belief gave them the motivation to keep moving forward. And there's one thing I've realised is that passion isn't about being excited every minute of every day. Passion is about caring enough to keep showing up, even on the difficult days, and that's a very different thing. Now, it's easy to stay motivated when everything is going well, but the real test comes when things aren't, and that's where passion becomes incredibly powerful. As I've been building ambition to achieve, there have already been days where interviews have been cancelled, plans have been changed, our videos haven't performed as well as I'd hoped. Now, it would be easy to become discouraged by that, but then I remind myself why I started this project in the first place. I started it because I genuinely love hearing people's stories. I love discovering what motivates people, and I love giving entrepreneurs a platform to share their journey. I also love helping people realise that successful business owners are ordinary people who simply decided to pursue an extraordinary ambition. When I reconnect with that purpose, the setbacks don't seem nearly as significant. The same is true for every entrepreneur I've spoken to. And their businesses aren't just about making money. They're about solving problems, helping people, and creating something meaningful, and also building that legacy to support their families and making a difference within their communities. Now, money is important, but businesses need to make a profit to survive. But I don't think profit alone is enough to keep someone motivated over many years. It comes from your purpose. And if there's one thing I'd encourage anyone watching this video to think about, it's this. Don't just ask yourself what you want to do. Ask yourself why you want to do it. Because when your ambition is connected to a genuine purpose, you'll find the strength to keep going long after that initial excitement fades. That was one of the clearest lessons every one of these entrepreneurs reinforced in me. Lesson number 3, success is built on relationships. Now, the third lesson that really stood out to me was that no entrepreneur succeeded completely on their own. Now, when we think about successful businesses, we often picture one person with a great idea building something incredible from scratch. But after speaking to these entrepreneurs, I realised it's never quite that simple. Because behind every successful business is a network of people, whether they're customers, family, friends, mentors, business partners, support organisations, local communities and suppliers. Every entrepreneur I interviewed spoke about people, and sometimes it was someone who would encourage them to take the leap. Sometimes it was a family member who believed in them when they doubted themselves. And sometimes it was a loyal customer who kept coming back. Or it was another business owner who offered advice when they needed it most. But it reminded me that business is fundamentally about people. Yes, products matter, and services matter, and marketing matters, but at the heart of every successful business are relationships. And one thing I noticed during the interviews was how grateful many of the entrepreneurs were. They weren't standing there saying, I did all of this by myself. Instead, they were thanking people, recognising support, and acknowledging the role others had played in helping them get to where they are today. And I think that's a really important mindset. Sometimes we feel like asking for help is a sign of weakness, but I actually think it's the opposite. The strongest people are often the ones who are prepared to ask questions, and they're prepared to learn, and they're prepared to listen. As many of you know, my day job involves supporting entrepreneurs across North Wales. Every week I meet people who have fantastic ideas. And one of the biggest differences I see between those who move forward and those who stay stuck is that the people who make progress aren't afraid to reach out. They ask questions, they seek advice, and they build relationships. And they connect with other people who have already walked that path before them. Because nobody knows everything, and every entrepreneur starts somewhere, and every entrepreneur is learning and benefits from having good people around them. Now, building ambition to achieve has reminded me of exactly the same thing. This channel wouldn't exist without the entrepreneurs who've trusted me with their stories. They've welcomed me into their businesses, given up their time, and shared their experiences openly and honestly. And I am incredibly grateful for every single one of them. It's also shown me how supportive the business community can be. People genuinely want to help each other and people want to see others succeed. And that's something I think we should celebrate more often. So if you're chasing an ambition of your own, don't feel like you have to do everything alone. Build relationships and be curious and ask those questions, and also support other people on your journey. Because one day, someone else might be saying exactly the same thing about you. Success isn't just about what you know. Very often it's about the people you meet, the relationships you build, and the reputation you create along that way. So lesson number 4, setbacks are part of every journey. Now the fourth lesson I've taken away from these interviews is something I think everyone needs to hear. Every entrepreneur experiences setbacks. When we scroll through social media, it's easy to think everyone else has it all figured out. We see the finished product, we see the successful business, and we see the awards, and we see the happy customers. What we don't always see are the difficult days that came before that. One thing I really appreciated about the entrepreneurs I've interviewed is that they didn't pretend everything had been easy. Many of them spoke openly about challenges they'd faced, plans that didn't quite work, unexpected problems, and moments of uncertainty and times when they had to adapt. And I think that's incredibly refreshing, because setbacks aren't a sign that you're failing, they're often a sign that you're trying. And if you're building something meaningful, there will always be obstacles. There will always be things you didn't expect, and there will always be moments where you question yourself. The difference is how you respond. The entrepreneurs I've spoken to didn't let setbacks define them. Instead, they treated them as opportunities to learn. Sometimes they changed direction and sometimes they refined an idea. Sometimes they had to go back to the drawing board. But the main thing is they didn't give up. They kept moving forward, and that resilience is something I've really admired. It's also something I've experienced myself while building ambition to achieve. This project hasn't always gone exactly to plan. Interviews have been cancelled and dates have been changed. Equipment hasn't always behaved, and videos haven't always performed the way I'd hoped. And if I'm honest, there have been moments where I've questioned whether I was doing the right thing. But then I remind myself why I started. Every entrepreneur I've interviewed has shown me that building something worthwhile takes time. Progress isn't always measured week by week. Sometimes it's measured over months and sometimes over years. If you only judge your progress by today's results, it's very easy to become discouraged. But if you look back 6 months or a year, you'll often realise just how far you've actually come. And I think that's one of the biggest mindset shifts I've had since starting this journey. Success isn't about avoiding those setbacks. It's about refusing to let setbacks become the end of your story. Every challenge teaches you something, and every mistake teaches you something, and every disappointment teaches you something. As long as you're willing to learn, nothing is truly wasted. So if you're watching this today and things haven't quite gone the way you'd hoped, don't assume your ambition has failed. It might simply be preparing you for the next chapter. Keep learning, keep adapting, and keep believing in what you're building. Because every entrepreneur I've interviewed has proved to me that setbacks aren't the opposite of success. They're often part of the journey towards it. So lesson number 5, consistency beats perfection every time. The fifth lesson that really stood out to me is that success isn't built through one huge moment. It's built through consistency. Now, when we look at successful businesses, it's easy to focus on the end result. We see a thriving company, we see a busy shop, and we see awards, and we see recognition. What we don't always see are the hundreds or even thousands of small decisions that got them there. Every entrepreneur I've interviewed has talked about hard work in one way or another. Not glamorous work, not exciting work, just consistently showing up, turning up every day and doing what needed to be done, even when they didn't necessarily feel like it. And I think that's one of the biggest misconceptions about success. People often wait until they feel motivated, but motivation comes and goes. Some days you'll wake up feeling full of energy, other days you won't. If your ambition depends entirely on motivation, eventually you'll stop. The entrepreneurs I've spoken to don't rely on motivation, they rely on that commitment. They've made a decision about where they want to go, and then they continue putting one foot in front of the other, even when progress feels slow, even when results aren't immediate, and even when nobody else notices. And that really resonated with me. Because if I'm honest, building ambition to achieve has taught me exactly the same lesson. There are videos that don't perform very well, and there are videos that don't. There are weeks when everything comes together perfectly, and there are weeks when interviews get rearranged, plans change, and nothing seems to go quite the way you'd imagined. But the important thing is continuing to film, continuing to edit and improve and learn, because every video teaches me something new. Every interview makes me a better interviewer, and every conversation gives me another perspective. Every upload helps me build this channel one step at a time, and I don't believe any of the entrepreneurs I interviewed became successful overnight. Their businesses have been built gradually, customer by customer, project by project, and year by year. And that's really encouraging, because it reminds us that we're not looking for one giant breakthrough. We're looking for that small, steady progress. Sometimes we put enormous pressure on ourselves to achieve something extraordinary immediately. But perhaps the better question is this: what small thing can I do consistently over the next 12 months? Because consistency has a remarkable way of producing results that don't seem possible at the beginning. Small actions repeated over time become something much bigger. And I genuinely believe that's true whether you're building a business, learning a new skill, improving your health, or chasing any ambition in life. You don't have to be perfect, you simply have to keep turning up, because consistency will almost always beat perfection in the long run. Lesson number 6 then. Success looks different for everyone. Now, the 6th lesson really made me stop and think. Before I started interviewing entrepreneurs, I think I had a fairly traditional view of success. I imagined success was about building a large business, making lots of money, employing lots of people, or becoming well known. But after speaking to 8 entrepreneurs, I realised that success means something completely different to every individual. For one person, success might be creating a business that gives them more time with their family. And for someone else, success is simply waking up every morning and doing work they genuinely enjoy. And for another entrepreneur, success is making a positive difference in their local community. And for someone else, it might be providing a secure future for the people they love. But what really struck me was that very few of the entrepreneurs measured success purely by money. Of course, businesses need to make a profit. Without profit, businesses can't survive. But profit wasn't the reason they got out of bed every morning. There was always something deeper, a purpose, a passion, a mission, and a reason why they started in the first place. And that made me reflect on my own ambitions. Why am I building ambition to achieve? Is it because I want millions of subscribers? No. Would that be nice one day? Of course it would. But that's not why I started. I started because I genuinely believe everyone has a story worth sharing. I believe entrepreneurs deserve a platform to inspire other people. And I believe someone watching these interviews could be inspired to take that first step towards their own ambition. If that happens, then this project is already making a difference. One of the dangers today is that we spend so much time comparing ourselves to everyone else. Social media makes it very easy to look at someone else's journey and think we're behind. We compare our beginning to someone else's middle or someone else's finish. But that's not a fair comparison. Every entrepreneur I interviewed had a different starting point, different opportunities, different challenges, and different life experiences, and different definitions of what success actually looked like. And that's exactly how it should be. Your ambition doesn't have to look like anybody else's. Your version of success doesn't need anyone else's approval. The only question that really matters is this: are you building a life that feels meaningful to you? Because if you spend your whole life chasing someone else's definition of success, you'll probably never feel satisfied. One of the greatest lessons these entrepreneurs have taught me is to define success for yourself. Not for social media, not for other people, not for society, for you. And once you know what success means to you, every decision becomes a little bit clearer. You're no longer trying to impress other people, you're building the future that matters most to you. I think that's one of the most powerful lessons I've learned since starting this journey. So lesson number 7. Your mindset can become your greatest strength or your biggest barrier. Now, the 7th lesson is probably the one that's challenged me the most personally. After speaking to 8 entrepreneurs, I've realised that success isn't just about having a great idea. It's about the mindset you bring to the journey. Every entrepreneur I interview faced moments where they could have talked themselves out of taking the next step. They could have focused on everything that might go wrong, and they could have waited until they felt more confident. They could have convinced themselves that someone else was more experienced, more qualified, and more capable. But they didn't. Instead, they chose to believe that they could figure things out along the way. Now, that doesn't mean they were always confident. In fact, quite the opposite. Confidence wasn't something they already had. Confidence was something they built through taking action. And I think that's a really important distinction. So many people believe they need confidence before they start, but I actually think confidence comes after you've started. Every time you solve a problem, every time you overcome a setback, and every time you achieve something you once thought was impossible, your confidence grows. One of the things I've learned through creating Ambition to Achieve is that mindset affects absolutely everything. When I recorded my first interview, I was really nervous. I wondered whether I'd asked the right questions, I wondered whether people would enjoy watching it, and I wondered whether anyone would even subscribe to the channel. Those thoughts are perfectly normal, but if I'd listened to them, I would never have recorded a single interview. Instead, I decided to focus on learning. Every interview has made me a little bit better, every conversation has made me a little bit more confident, and every video has taught me something new. Yes, I'm still improving, and I hope I always will be. That's another thing I noticed about the entrepreneurs I interviewed. None of them believed they had made it. They were all still learning, still adapting, and still looking for ways to improve. And that's a really healthy mindset to have. Because the moment you think you've got nothing left to learn, you stop growing. And one of the biggest barriers to achieving any ambition isn't a lack of opportunity. It's often the conversation we have with ourselves. We tell ourselves we're not ready, we're not experienced enough, we're too old, we're too young, it's too late, someone else is already doing it. But those are stories we create in our own minds. The entrepreneurs I've interviewed have shown me that your mindset can either become the thing that moves you forward or the thing that keeps you standing still. So, my encouragement to anyone watching this is simple. Be kind to yourself, believe in your ability to learn, and accept that you won't have all the answers. And remember that every successful entrepreneur was once standing exactly where you are now, wondering whether to take that very first step. And the difference is that they chose to believe that their ambition was worth pursuing. And perhaps that's the most important mindset of all. So, lesson number 8. Ambition is a journey, not a destination. The 8th and final lesson is probably the biggest one I've taken away from all of these conversations. Ambition isn't something you achieve once, it's something you continue to live. Before I started interviewing entrepreneurs, I think I imagined there would be a point where people reached the top, a point where everything became easy, and a point where they could finally say, I've made it. But after sitting down with 8 different entrepreneurs, I don't think that moment really exists. Every single person I interviewed still had goals, they still had ideas, and they still had dreams. They were still looking ahead to the next challenge, and that really inspired me, because it showed me that ambition isn't about reaching one finish line. It's about continuing to grow, continuing to learn, and continuing to improve. As human beings, I think we're at our best when we're working towards something that really excites us. That doesn't have to mean building a business. Your ambition might be writing a book, learning a new skill, changing career, running a marathon or losing weight, or spending more time with your family, or volunteering in your community, starting a charity, or travelling the world. Whatever your ambition is, it matters because it matters to you. And one thing I've realised from hosting Ambition to Achieve is that success isn't reserved for extraordinary people. It's achieved by ordinary people who make the decision to keep moving forward, one step at a time. And that's probably the biggest message I hope this channel shares. You don't have to be famous, you don't have to be wealthy, and you don't have to be the smartest person in the room. You simply have to be willing to start, to learn, to adapt, and to keep going. Now, as I sit here today, I'm still building this channel. I'm still learning how to become a better interviewer, and I'm still learning how to tell stories. I'm still learning how to create better videos. And honestly, I'm excited about that, because this isn't just a YouTube channel. It's a journey. It's a chance to meet incredible people and to hear inspiring stories and to learn lessons that I can apply to my own life, and hopefully to inspire someone else to take that first step towards their own ambition. If these 8 interviews have taught me anything, it's this. Every great achievement begins with a decision to stop waiting, and a decision to believe in yourself. A decision to take that first step even if you don't know exactly where the road will lead. And that's what ambition is. It's choosing to move forward even when the destination isn't completely clear. And if these entrepreneurs have shown me anything, it's that incredible things can happen when you make that choice. So, those are the 8 biggest lessons I've taken away from interviewing 8 incredible entrepreneurs. The interesting thing is, none of these lessons came from textbooks. They came from real people, people who've taken risks and people who've experienced setbacks, and people who've built businesses from the ground up, and people who are still learning, still growing, and still chasing their ambitions every single day. And I feel incredibly privileged that they've trusted me to share their stories here on Ambition to Achieve. If there's one message I'd love you to take away from today's video, it's this. You don't have to have everything figured out before you begin. You don't need to have that perfect business plan, and you don't need the perfect equipment nor the perfect timing. You simply need to be willing to take that first step, because every entrepreneur I've spoken to started exactly where we all start, with an idea, a dream, and the courage to do something about it. So if you're watching this today and there's something you've been putting off, maybe this is your sign to take that first step. It doesn't have to be a giant leap. It might simply be making a phone call, sending an email, or registering a business name, or learning a new skill, or telling someone about your ambition for the very first time. Small steps taken consistently have an incredible way of leading to extraordinary places, and I genuinely love to know your thoughts. Which of these 8 lessons resonated with you most? Or perhaps you've already started your own journey and there's a lesson you've learned that could help somebody else. Leave it in the comments below, because I'd love to read them, and who knows, your experience might inspire someone else to take that first leap. If you've enjoyed this video then, I'd really appreciate it if you could give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who's chasing an ambition of their own. And if you'd like to be featured on Ambition to Achieve, or you know an entrepreneur with an inspiring story to tell, I'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for supporting the journey, and thank you for being part of the Ambition to Achieve community. Until next time, keep believing in your ambition, keep taking action, and remember, ambition only becomes reality when you decide to begin. And I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.